The history of banking is rather surprising. It includes some of the fundamental roots of anti-Semitism, accountant knights, and secret bookkeeping. Now, when you think of banking, you probably think of skyscrapers, stock markets, and credit cards. But the skeleton of our financial system was built not in the modern world, but in the Middle Ages. And surprisingly, one of the first businesses to resemble modern banks wasn't a business at all. It was a religious military order, the Knights Templar. Let's rewind to the 12th century. Europe is in the middle of the Crusades and pilgrims are streaming towards Jerusalem, many of them carrying their life savings. But travel is dangerous. Bandits, warlords, and sheer distance make moving money across continents incredibly risky. So the Templars came up with a solution. In major cities like London, Paris, and Acre, they set up a number of preceptories, essentially branch offices. A pilgrim could deposit their money at one Templar house, receive a coded letter of credit, and then withdraw their funds at their destination. It was the first international banking system, and it was shockingly advanced. Templars also lent money to kings, funded military campaigns, and managed estates. They were warrior monks, but also accountants, administrators, and money handlers. In many ways, they were the first multinational financial corporation. But their success came at a cost. In 1307, the French king Philip IV, who was deep in debt to the Templars, orchestrated their downfall. On Friday the 13th, and this is the origin for the Friday the 13th superstition, Templars across France were arrested, tortured, and executed. Their order was dissolved and their wealth confiscated. But the idea of secure international finance didn't die with the Templars. Instead, it was picked up and transformed by a new kind of power, the Italian city-states. In cities like Venice, Florence, and Genoa, medieval merchants were building vast trade networks across the Mediterranean and into northern Europe. But trade on that scale requires money, credit, and trust. So these cities became laboratories for financial innovation. Let's take Florence, for example. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Florence was home to powerful banking families like the Bardi, the Peruzzi, and eventually the Medici. These banks attracted deposits from people like urban artisans, shopkeepers, and minor nobles, people who had cash and ties to the commercial economy. Keeping their money in a bank allowed them to keep it safe and to write bills of exchange. Bills of exchange were documents that allowed a merchant to pay for goods without using physical coins. A Florentine merchant could sell wool in Bruges and, instead of carrying gold back to Italy, receive a bill that he could redeem for cash from a banking partner in Florence. These were early versions of checks or wire transfers. But that raises a question: where did the banker get the cash to pay out? Here's where the system gets clever. See, the banks weren't just sitting on big piles of gold. They worked as part of an international network with branches or trusted partners in other cities. When the buyer in Bruges gave out that bill of exchange, his local bank would settle things with their Florentine partner on paper in the bank's ledgers instead of shipping coins across Europe. Each bank kept a clearing account with others in the network, and over time, payments in different directions would mostly cancel each other out. If a Florence bank owed money to Bruges but also had incoming payments from Bruges, they could settle the difference without moving any actual gold. If things were getting lopsided, each bank had a range of options, and each branch was kept apprised of what was happening with others in the network. They also developed double-entry bookkeeping, which allowed them to track credits and debits with far more precision. And this system is still the backbone of accounting today. But there was a problem. The church strictly forbade usury, which is charging interest on loans. So how did medieval bankers survive? Well, they got creative. Interest was structured into fees or currency exchange rates or recorded as fictional sales. For instance, a banker might promise to sell you a barrel of wool for 100 florins and then buy it back from you for 110 florins in a year. That 10 florin difference was the interest in disguise. Now, others relied on Jewish moneylenders who were outside church law and unfortunately very vulnerable to persecution. In many cases, kings and nobles would borrow freely, then expel or kill their creditors when debts got too high. And this was a major factor in institutional anti-Semitic pogroms of the Middle Ages. Being able to just kick the guy you owe money to out of the country is very convenient. and it sadly incentivized active anti-Semitic rabble-rousing throughout the Middle Ages. And this is the origin of the association of the Jewish people with banking, which unfortunately continues today as an anti-Semitic trope of the Jewish people controlling the world's money supply. Despite these dangers, the system grew more sophisticated. Italian banks opened branches in London, Paris, Bruges, and Rome, creating a network of credit and information that connected Europe. Some even began issuing early banknotes, though they were more like promissory notes than modern currency. The Medici Bank at its height was the most powerful financial institution in Europe. It financed kings, popes, and emperors, and it used its money to shape culture and power. It wasn't just finance, it was soft empire. However, there were dangers. There was no deposit insurance, no central bank, no government bailout. If your banker failed, and many did, you could lose everything. That's why reputation mattered more than regulation, and why the Medici Bank was so trusted. Not because of laws, but because of its name and its network. So the next time you walk past an ATM or check your balance on a phone, remember, you're not looking at something new. You're looking at the evolution of a medieval invention, a story written in ink and blood by knights, moneylenders, merchants, and mathematicians. A story born out of danger, shaped by necessity, and still pulsing through our lives today.